What would it feel like to be truly, deeply happy, regardless of your circumstances? Did you know that happiness is a choice and not a result? That you can create your life on purpose? Join us now to learn more. This is the Time to Rise and Thrive radio show. And here's your host, mindset coach, and facilitator of change, Jackie Mott.
Hello and welcome, welcome. Happy Friday. My hair's a little bit because we have all of a sudden, and this is what happens almost every year, all of a sudden it becomes summer, like overnight. So last week I was wearing a jacket outside. Today it's 28 degrees Celsius, which works out to low 80s, I believe, Fahrenheit. So it's warm. It's quite warm. I'm going to have to kind of figure out what to do with this mop before I get on the show next week because I wasn't even thinking about that today. Anyway, hi. Welcome. Welcome. I'm happy to have you with me. You are with me on Time to Rise and Thrive on Inspired Choices Network. I'm your host, Jackie Mott. And today our show is called Starting Over. It's Never Too Late. And it isn't. It's never too late. So we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff today. I will tell you that I want to bring this midlife thing into it at some point during the show, but it's not part of the plan yet. So I'll work it in somewhere. And if you are at that stage in life, or you know somebody who is at that stage of life, you might want to get them on this call or send them the recording or send them the link or whatever. So here we are on Time to Rise and Thrive. And what we do on this show is that we talk about our subliminal soundtrack, about how to get it working for us rather than against us, and about getting to understand this idea that we are a brilliant contribution to this world. So seeing your value, seeing your unique beauty, seeing the gifts that you bring, that you are the only person who can bring to the table. And how wonderful is that? So I'll get into a quick explanation of subliminal soundtrack in just a minute, but we'll first talk about what we're going to be doing today on the show. So what do you do when life throws a wrench into your plans? How do you move forward when you lose someone or something that helped you define yourself? That's a tricky thing. It is a tricky thing. You start over. It's a theme of this life. Starting over is scary and painful and hard, so we may shy away from it and try to avoid it. And the truth is that starting over allows you freedoms that previously weren't available. We've talked about this many times: transformation and rebirth. Rebirth, my friends, rebirth. I talk about it so much for a very good reason. It's because it's so important for us to come to a place of understanding that the pain and the struggle we experience in transformation is temporary, while resisting the process, resisting that recreation, growth, and rebirth can actually lock you up in a chronic and potentially lifelong spiritual pain. So it's very important for us to get to a point where we can understand when these things happen. Okay, I've got this, and what else is possible that wasn't available to me before? What is available to me now that couldn't before because of whatever circumstances they were? And that is what today's show is about. I am so excited. I am so excited. This last couple of weeks, there's been this crazy sort of like creative energy flow that's been going on for me. So we talked last week. I think it was last week. We talked recently about this exhaustion that I found myself in. And I wanted to just say really quickly, I don't want to get hung up on that because it's probably a show all by itself, but there was a gift that came out of that exhaustion. And the gift was this. My thinking mind was so tired that when somebody asked me a question, I just answered, and it came from my soul, my being, my heart, the answer that I gave them. And I realized that there's a thing that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time, and this is it. So we're going to get into this starting over. It is never too late. Never too late. As long as you are still on this side of the dirt, you are still breathing, and you still have any strength and faculties left, it is never too late to start over. Play with that. Play with that energy. It's yummy, man. It's juicy. All right. So today, let's get into the subliminal soundtrack just really quickly first. So subliminal soundtrack is my term. It's something that I dubbed Again, something that just fell out of my mouth one day and I went, "Ooh, that's a good idea." So it is this loop of messages that plays in the back of our minds all day, every day. You may have heard it called internal script, internal dialogue. It's all sort of the same idea, but this is my way of looking at that thing. So we have this loop that plays all day, every day, and the loop is made up of bits of information that we've sort of gathered as we have lived our lives. So every relationship you've ever been part of, every lesson you've ever learned, every single experience that you've ever had on this planet has given you little bits of information that have then gotten stored on your subliminal soundtrack. And we use that information to make our belief systems about who we are, about what we are, about what we bring to the table, about the world in general, and about what anything means. Okay. So, for example, if you believe, if for some reason you've got stuck in there that money is a bad thing for some reason, and it's a very common thing, having a great deal of money for a lot of people is a difficult thing. So, if you have one of those messages stuck back in here, it really will cause you to make decisions that may actually keep that wealth, that money, that thing away from you because our mind is designed to protect us. Our mind is designed to create these belief systems and create these ways of being with things in a way that will keep us safe. Now, that can be really helpful if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, right? But when it comes to money or relationships or any other number of things, when it comes to that, it actually can cause us to hold ourselves back from people, from situations, from opportunities that could in fact be really good, bring us a lot of joy, that could create so much more for us if we were open to it. So it's really important for us to get clear on what's going on in our subliminal soundtrack so that we can actually start to shift the messages that are causing us to hold ourselves back or create limitations in our world. So, how this relates to starting over is basically this: if you believe that your value lies in the opinions of others or that you can't make it on your own, ooh, you will hold on to unhealthy situations and relationships. And if or when you find yourself in the position of having to start over because you didn't choose it for yourself, you may well freeze and not take the action that you need to take in order to move forward. So you get stuck. Do you see what I'm saying? But if we believe that you have everything you need to deal with any situation that comes your way, that you're strong and beautiful and brilliant in your own right, and that you can and will figure things out no matter what happens, you will quickly find your feet. You will get about the business of starting over. And if you are really good at this, if you get really good at this, then you will actually learn to embrace the struggle, embrace the pain, because you know that on the other side of that is something that you have not yet been able to perceive, but you know that it's leading you to someplace good. So, do you want to get good at it? I don't know. What do you think? What do you think? All right. So, when I was getting ready to do today's show, there was a bunch of stuff that was going on. There was a bunch of stuff that was going on because I have had to go through this starting over process so many different times in my life. I want to be clear. It can come out of any sort of situation. Moving, moving is a new start. Starting a new job, starting a new relationship, ending a relationship, like any number of different things. And some of them are big, having a child, becoming an empty nester. All of these things that are happening are major transition points in our lives. Major, absolutely perfectly normal, and major. And here's the thing about human beings: human beings sometimes don't really like change. I don't know if that's you. I know I lived there for a while, and I'm sure a lot of the people I know have at least been there at some point, if they are not currently in that space. Change is hard. And change is hard because it requires us to shift our routines. It requires us to get to know different people. It requires us sometimes to leave people behind, especially if you make a big move and you go across the country or whatever the case may be. You will be required to at least shift those relationships, because you're not going to be able to go and have a coffee with somebody who now lives thousands of miles away, right? Unless you make a trip. But until they invent some mode of transportation that gets us like that, it can take a lot of effort and a lot of money to make those trips. So you'll shift those relationships. You're not going to be able to do the things maybe that you had done before. When we are going into a new job, there's a whole new environment, there's a whole new group of people. There may be a whole new set of tasks that we don't know, skills that we may need to develop when you're starting new relationships. Of course, right? When we're starting a new romantic relationship with a new partner, it's a whole thing of we have to adjust, we have to get to know who they are, we have to let them close enough to get to know who we are, so that it's all of that dynamic stuff that you need to figure out at the beginning of anything. All right, so any major transition is going to create upheaval. It's going to create that things that we need to then think about, right? We need to now think about it. How am I going to make this work now? Do you see what I'm saying? So that's why we often are very resistant to change. It can be very uncomfortable, especially the ones that include a sense of grief or pain. When we're leaving behind people, when people die, when those sorts of things happen, grief response can come from any loss, any loss. So there's a natural grief response, and that is uncomfortable. In fact, it hurts, right? So all of these changes, although some of them could be incredibly happy changes, they still can cause us to get into this grief response, this sort of loss place. Because once you become a mom, if you're not a mom yet, I just want to give you a heads up. Your life will never be the same. Your life will never be the same once you become a mom. Would I change it? Absolutely not. But there is a period that we have to go through this adjustment thing. So some of these messages that we get going on can hold us back from making the changes. Some of them tell us that change is scary, and it is. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to buy into it, hold on to it, hold it close to our hearts, and therefore not make the change that might actually bring us to some place we've never been, to a new world, to a whole new world, right? It doesn't mean that we necessarily don't make that choice or don't take action toward that thing. It doesn't mean that we don't do that. It just means that we need to acknowledge, as we're going into this transition piece, we need to acknowledge that it is difficult. We need to allow ourselves the space and the room to grow and figure out our new routine, our new life, and whatever factor that looks like for you. We need to give ourselves permission and give ourselves the space to allow ourselves to change. Okay. So some of the stuff that I'm gonna talk about on the show is stuff that I have not really said a lot about, and only because today in this context in this show, it's actually relevant. But we're gonna get into that in the next segment. And as we've been doing for the last several weeks, I think it's probably months now, actually, for the last several weeks at least, the third segment of the show has become sort of a here's what we're talking about session. Okay. So it's a mini workshop built into the show. Grab yourself a piece of paper and a pen or a book or whatever it is that you need to do that. Everybody's got their own way of doing that, but I promise you there's going to be a few good nuggets in there. So grab yourself a pen and paper, and get ready for that. When we come back, we're going to go to our first break because it just seems like we're kind of there already. So let's go to the first break. When we come back, I'm going to talk with you more about this idea of embracing the pain and struggle that's starting over, because it is the key that will unlock that beautiful golden cage that has kept you locked up and stuck and from becoming who you were truly born to be. All right. So stick with us for just a moment. We are going to head to our first break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about this yummy juiciness. All right. Hold on. We'll be right back.
What do you tell yourself when you're not listening? This question came to Jackie Mott when she was trying to find peace and purpose in the wake of tragedy. She began to understand that a lot of her pain and choices had been the result of how she perceived herself and her place in the world. And she set about creating a new subliminal soundtrack that would support her in creating a life of abundance, joy, and fulfillment. To learn more about how she did that and how you can do the same, join Jackie on her radio show, Time to Rise and Thrive, every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central, 11 a.m. Mountain, and 10 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is the Time to Rise and Thrive show with mindset coach and facilitator of change, Jackie Mott. To participate in the program, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. For more information, visit phoenixcoach.ca, where you can follow Phoenix Coaching online. Now, back to the program.
Hello and welcome back to Time to Rise and Thrive on Inspired Choices Network. I'm your host, Jackie Mott, and today we are talking about embracing the pain and struggle of starting over, because it's the key that will unlock that beautiful golden cage that has kept you locked up and stuck. I'm telling you, like, I've gone through this so many times, moves to a different place, becoming a mom when I was 17, so on and so on and so on and so on. There is one specific change that I don't usually talk about. And there are some very good reasons that I don't usually talk about it. It is this time of the last few years, my separation and the divorce process. It has not been an easy time. And quite frankly, I don't usually think that it's terribly relevant. But in this context of today's show, I'm going to share with you some of it. There's stuff that we just don't even need to talk about, but I'm going to share with you a little bit about this whole process, because that change, that transition has been one of the most impactful, most influential changes in my life. Okay. So I don't talk about this very often, because I don't want to get into the energy of it. Okay. That's the truth. I don't want to get into the energy of it. It's an uncomfortable place. The truth is that we had a really long standing relationship and it had served us both really well. It had been quite beautiful, especially in the beginning. And the truth is also that at a certain point, it no longer fit. It no longer fit for me, and I'm sure it no longer fit for him. But we kept ourselves sort of stuck in it. I can't speak to what his reasons were. Not even worried about that at the moment. But I can tell you that I had gotten so sort of wrapped up in this idea of the vows and the promises and the till death do us parts. Do you see what I'm saying? I'd gotten so wrapped up in that I didn't even consider. I just didn't even consider that I may have other things available to me if I got into a different place. Okay. Yeah, it could have been handled better. It could have been handled better, probably by both of us. And I really sort of wish that we had been able to walk away in a way that would have honored what we had shared. Unfortunately, that's not how it went. But the relevant stuff to what we're talking about today is this thing about starting over in midlife. And I'm going to tell you, one of the things that has happened is that I said this beautiful creative space has opened up for me in the last couple of weeks, and I've actually designed a program I've actually designed a program for when we are going through major transitions in our lives. I'm very excited about this. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to talk about in the next segment. Um, it, so, as we discussed before, this can happen when we're transitioning in any way. So, empty nester, birth of a new child, they're opposites of the same coin. Okay, ending or beginning of a new relationship, either through divorce or through widowhood, marriage, like whatever. It could be any kind of relationship, but that's really what the program is going to be dealing with, because some of these things are really, they're really impactful. Okay, they're really impactful on who we perceive ourselves to be, how we show up in the world when we're getting into that subliminal soundtrack stuff again. Okay. So, who do I believe myself to be? If I believe myself to be a person who is attached to this title and this role and this person, then when that is no longer part of my world, who am I? Who am I now? Right. And so that's why these things are so important. We have to get some clarity. We have to get some stuff going in the subliminal soundtracks, sort of break those messages, break those beliefs that no longer fit us, and replace them with ones that do fit us and propel us in the direction of moving forward rather than holding us in place. Okay? So, I've designed this program, and the process for any major shift is really quite similar. Any major shift. So, we have moved I'm trying to think. We moved from, well, when we moved from Windsor, when I was born in Windsor, we moved there, or moved from there to London when I was 7 years old. Moved from London to Trenton. I don't even know how long ago, 15, 20 years ago. Stayed there for a couple of years and then moved out west, and we were there for 4 or 5 years, and then we came back to London. So each one of those shifts, right? Each one of those changes. Now, when we moved here when I was 7, I had a friend base in Windsor, right? I was old enough that I had a friend base, and my older sisters and my brother, and I'm sure my parents and like everybody had that sort of social circle that was there for us in the old neighborhood. When we came to the new neighborhood, it was necessary for us to create new relationships and new social circles, new ways of doing things, right? Because you've gone to a different place. When we moved from here up to Trenton, same thing. And I'm one of those people that doesn't seem to have too much trouble in making friends. So I was able to make those transitions pretty easily. I like people. I like people. And yeah, so at each different stage, it was creating a new social circle for yourself. It was creating a new routine. It was creating a new way of being, or adopting thinking patterns. I know that I've talked about this with many of my friends. When we lived in Alberta, there's a different way of being there. And I don't really know how to describe it, but there's a thought process, or a way of thinking, maybe is a better way to say it, that is very different from Ontario. So it was a real transition to go from Ontario to Alberta, because you had to get the lay of the land, and you had to figure out, not only are you thousands of miles away from every person that you've ever known, but it's almost a different culture, which is kind of crazy because it's within the same country, but it's almost a different culture. People have a different way of being with money. People have a different way of being with, opportunity, with all kinds of stuff, with personal responsibility. And I credit that particular move with helping me to do a lot of my internal work, because I had never yet considered that there was a different way of being, because Ontario was all I'd ever known. And Jen, our producer today, she says, same as on the East Coast. Inside a country, it amazes me that there can be such cultural differences from here to here to here, but there are. So when you make these kinds of moves, it can be major transition, major transition. When you get married, there is now, I mean, maybe you've lived with a person before, maybe you haven't, but there can be that factor of, now I need to have another person in my space, and how do we work this out? Who's responsible for this, and all of the dynamics that go into that type of a relationship. There are now new family members, right? So we sort of incorporate each other's families now into one big family. And so who are those people and what are the relationships like, and where do they fit in my scheme and all of that kind of stuff. There could be children that are coming into a new marriage. There are so many different factors that can affect it. So it can be quite a shock to the system when we are going through a major change, right? It can be a major shock to our system. And that's why it's so very important for us to allow time and space. Allow time and space, because sometimes it's that stuff needs to settle. It's all crazy, but it needs to settle before we can actually even get a feel for the landscape, before we can start to um, create those new relationships or create our new social circle, create our new activities, all of that stuff. Okay. I know, like when we moved out west, we actually lived in a hotel for, I think it was 3 months before we actually found a home. And so in that 3 months, our social circle became whoever we worked with, I guess. Not really, because they weren't like, I wasn't going out and spending time with those people on a social basis. But the people who operated the hotel. So I would go downstairs every once in a while, have a cup of tea with the front desk clerk if she was working. There was one that I really kind of bonded with, and so if she was working, then I would sometimes take my tea and my cup and go downstairs and fill it up with hot water and stand at the front desk and talk with her, if she was free. So this is what I'm saying. Like, then we moved from there to the little town that we moved to, and now we had to create a whole new, right? So even inside that move, there were two moves, and all of this creates the upheaval. All right. So allow yourself the space and the patience with yourself, because there will be feelings. They might be wonderful and awful at the same time. It's a really interesting space to be in, because you've got that, like, oh, this is such a great thing for us and I'm so hopeful, and oh my god, where are we going to live and how are we going to pay the bills, and so there's like, it's this whole thing. So sometimes we've got to let things settle down before we can get a good picture of what it looks like and what we need to do now. Okay. So that's sort of the stuff that we need to be thinking about when we find ourselves in this place. And sometimes it happens, it's absolutely part of our plan. Marriages don't generally happen within a few days. I mean, sometimes they do, I suppose, but generally that's something that we plan for. So we have that time frame to work in, to work out our feelings, to, you know, get that stuff figured out. We have that time frame, especially if you're in a position where someone has passed away, or you've lost a relationship that was one of your cornerstone relationships very suddenly. You don't have that time. You don't have that time. So that will be even more impactful. That will be even more of a shock to your system. And I think we've still got a couple of minutes before we go to break. So I think this is where I'm going to slide in this midlife crisis sort of thing. And I want to be clear, midlife crisis, I think, is a bit of a misnomer, but it's the thing that everybody knows. So we're gonna go with that. Um, what I believe happens to us sort of in our midlife period is that we come to a place where we no longer feel invincible. We come to a place where we know that our days are limited. And this can be brought on by any number of different changes. For myself, I will say that I believe that losing my sister when I was 40 years old was the place where my midlife crisis started. And it was this place where I became very, very clear on what is going on in my life and am I happy with it, because this thing had happened. And I know, we talked about the plans that my sister still had, the things that she still wanted to do. We talked about those things. So I know that she had every intention of doing this and this and this and this while she was still here. And nobody knew that on that day that truck was going to take her out. Nobody knew. So when we are in this position where something sudden and shocking has happened, it it pushes us to this place of examination, of evaluation. What does my life look like? What am I happy with? What am I not? And we often start to make those changes at that period in our lives. I also think it probably has something to do with hormone levels, because this is also right around the time that women go through menopause, and I think it's andropause for men, but it's the same sort of physiological changes are now happening, and we start to feel a little bit like the clock is beginning to wind down. That doesn't mean you have to slow down. That doesn't mean that you have to get old. It just means we're starting to understand the reality of, I'm not going to be here forever. And if I really want to make an impact while I'm here, then I need to be conscious about that. I need to start moving in that direction. Okay. So often these midlife crisis things actually push us out of our comfort zones and into a place where we are evaluating our lives, and we decide to go in a different direction. And I'm just going to ask you to play with the space of, what if that's okay? What if it's okay for us to drop all of those judgments and all of those beliefs that tell us that it's wrong? It's wrong to leave a marriage. It's wrong to, go move across the world with nothing but your bags. It's wrong to, there are so many judgments that we have around these changes. And sometimes they are the best thing that could ever happen to us. So I want us to play with that energy just a little bit, that it's okay. It's okay for things to fall apart. It's okay for things to have served their purpose. It's okay for people to move on. It's okay. All right. So that's what I would like for us to just be playing with over the next few minutes while we go to our next break. Don't forget to grab your pen and paper, because when we come back, I'm going to walk you through some of the stuff that's going to be part of this new program that I've created for people that are hitting their midlife place and starting to go through major transitions. So you are with me on Time to Rise and Thrive. I'm your host, Jackie Mott. We're on Inspired Choices Network. Grab that pen and paper and meet me back here in just a minute. Okay. See you in a minute.
What do you tell yourself when you're not listening? This question came to Jackie Mott when she was trying to find peace and purpose in the wake of tragedy. She began to understand that a lot of her pain and choices had been the result of how she perceived herself and her place in the world. And she set about creating a new subliminal soundtrack that would support her in creating a life of abundance, joy, and fulfillment. To learn more about how she did that and how you can do the same, join Jackie on her radio show, Time to Rise and Thrive, every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central, 11 a.m. Mountain, and 10 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
What do you tell yourself when you're not listening? Our subliminal soundtrack plays in the back of our minds 24/7. It's filled with everything we've ever learned about money, relationships, body, and sexuality, about every single aspect of our lives. If you don't have what you desire, the Subliminal Soundtrack Reset program may be the very key to changing it all. In this 8-week program, designed by Jackie Mott, you'll learn to replace messages that stop your desires with new ones that not only support you in creating what you truly desire, but expand your life to higher levels of joy and pleasure. Go to phoenixcoach.ca today to sign up and begin creating your life on purpose.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is the Time to Rise and Thrive show with mindset coach and facilitator of change, Jackie Mott. To participate in the program, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
For more information, visit phoenixcoach.ca, where you can follow Phoenix Coaching online. Now, back to the program.
Hello and welcome back to Time to Rise and Thrive on Inspired Choices Network. I'm your host, Jackie Mott, and today we are talking about embracing that pain and struggle of starting over, because it is the key that will unlock the golden cage that has kept you locked up and stuck. How does it get better than that? How does it get better than that? So this is actually the point in the show where I'm supposed to tell you what's going on. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this new program. I'm so excited about this. I got to tell you, this is something that's been sort of percolating in the back of my mind for probably 2 years, maybe 3 years. It's just been sort of percolating back there. And I had this conversation with this woman where it just fell out of my mouth. And when that happens, I always pay attention, because very often when I'm not in my thinking brain, when I'm not in that limitation of the subliminal soundtrack, is when the most beautiful stuff pops out and you go, oh boy, that is the thing. That is the thing. So it is going to be all about the stages of starting over at any point in your life and for any reason. Um, Typically it's probably going to be, well, I'll just tell you, there's a thing that we call the ideal client. In the business world, it's the ideal client. So this is the avatar, this is the person that you really want to talk to or work with, and it very often comes from a space that you have already walked your way through, from a thing that you have learned and grown. So now you have that knowledge, and you have the tools and all of the information to help other people. So if you're somebody like me or a lot of other coaches, often our best programming comes from things that we have walked through. And that is exactly what this thing is being designed around. It's God, I just feel so blessed and so humbled and so excited about this stuff, because when we're not in our flow, it's like, oh, okay, I can figure that out. I will figure that out. I know. When we are in our flow, it just comes. It just comes easily and naturally. It is so yummy to be in that energy of flow and ease. And that is exactly what happened when I sat down and started to figure out this program. So I will be opening it up for 6-month one-on-one clients. I am. It is open. It is open for 6 months one-on-one clients. I'm going to give you sort of the the outline, the outline in the show today. But that is who I am wanting to work with. Um, yeah, and if you would like more information, I'm just going to tell you, go to www.jackiemott. No, I'm sorry, www.bookacallwithjackie.com. That's the one. To schedule a complimentary one-on-one call with me, so we can talk about what are the circumstances that are going. What are you starting over? What is it that you're doing? Are you starting a business? Are you, are you getting married? Are you getting divorced? Are you moving? Are you what are you starting over? Right? And we can get a feel for whether or not this would be a good program for you. At the very least, if you call me and we do one of these complimentary sessions, you're going to get something out of it. I promise. I promise you will get something out of it. And you may well find the answers to some of the questions or some of the challenges that you are currently facing. So that's www.bookacallwithjackie.com. And I think it's set up for 15 minutes. We'll have a conversation. Okay. So grab that pen and paper, because here we go. So what do we do? What do we do when we find ourselves at a place, a new beginning, a starting over point, a shifting in our life that we need to adjust? What do we do? First thing, first stage. So I've got 5 stages of starting over. And within that, I've created several steps. Okay. So the first stage is ground zero. We are dealing with the fallout here. Okay. So whatever it is, and remember, even positive changes can have the fallout, because there are things that we need to deal with. There are things that we need to figure out inside that new context. So stage 1 is ground zero, dealing with the fallout. Step 1, identify where you are right now. It is very important for us to come to a place, and it can be very difficult to get to this place, depending on what the changes are that you were going through, but it is very, very important for us to come to the place where we understand and where we can accept that our life as we've known it is back there. Okay. We are going through this transition now, and what we have previously known, what we've previously done, what we've previously defined in our world is no longer there. Okay. So it's think about a kid going off to summer camp. What happens? They long for mommy and daddy, right? They long for home. They long for comfort. You give them a little bit of time and some fun activities. And most kids will then have an amazing time while they're away from mommy and daddy. But at first, it is it can be traumatic and scary and painful and all of that kind of stuff. So that's your first thing. We need to figure out where we are right now. Okay. We need to assess the damage. If it's something like a sudden death or whatever, what is the damage that this has created? And I really was purposeful in ground zero because that is where I perceive any type of situation starts from. Usually there's a whole lot of debris and mess that we need to deal with before we can clear it and start to build a new foundation for our new life. Okay. So step one is to identify where you are at right now. So this is where you're assessing the damage. What is the impact? What do I need to do? Step two is, where do I go from here? Right? Do I walk away completely? Like I'm here, I am standing in a great big pile of rubble, or on a great big pile of rubble, whatever works out. But here I am, and I'm surrounded by all of this chaos, and I don't know what to do with this stuff. Where do I go from here? Do I completely walk away? Leave the rubble behind and let somebody else worry about it? Or do I clear the rubble so that I can start with that clean foundation? Very important decision that has to be made. And only you can make that decision. Nobody else has the right to tell you what is the proper decision for you. You figure that out. So am I going to move on completely and leave it all behind? Or am I in a position like maybe there are kids involved, and maybe making that move doesn't make sense, or maybe there's financial stuff going on that making that move to walk away doesn't make sense. There could be any number of factors that cause us to make the decision to stay rather than go, or to go rather than stay. Okay. So where do I go from here? Step three is, who am I now? Now, this is one of those things, I've talked about it a few times, and I'm going to say it again because it's very relevant to what we're talking about right now. There was a point when my marriage ended where I realized that I had so identified myself, who I was, what I brought to the table, the whole thing. That's fun. I had so identified with being the wife to that person that I I was his Jackie. That was the truth. So I identified myself as that. When that was no longer a factor in my world, it was necessary for me to go, okay, well, who am I now? Who am I without that thing? And that could be anything. That could be, I'm no longer living in Ontario. So who do I be in Alberta? Or I'm no longer single. I'm now getting married. I'm no longer, you know, not a person who's a mother. I can't even think of what to call that. I'm no longer that person. I'm now becoming a mother or a father or an aunt or an uncle or anything, right? I now have a new career, whatever it is. So we have to get clear on that life that we have known is gone. That's the first stage. The second stage is healing. And this is where we get into the work with the subliminal mindset mastery. So we have to do this radical personal responsibility. Again, we've talked about this on the show a number of times. This is where we assess, okay, so what is my responsibility? What is my responsibility in the circumstances? And sometimes that happens as we're clearing the rubble. Sometimes that's part of the process of putting things back together again or taking them apart, whatever, right? So we have to get into this, okay, radical personal responsibility. You can choose to be a victim, or you can choose to not be a victim. Okay. So that's sort of part of that decision making that we need to do. Step 5 is forgiving yourself, because now we've gotten clarity. Okay. So What was my contribution to this thing? Um, maybe I could have done things differently. Maybe I wish I had done things differently, whatever it is. But you need to forgive yourself for that. Whatever that part that you played that you maybe aren't so proud of or maybe aren't so happy about, forgive yourself. Okay. Step 6 becomes forgive the other people and release. Okay. Whoever else is involved in this, forgive and release. Okay. Now we move on to stage 3, and we are going to be going over break. I'm sorry, but this is how it's working out today. Taking care of business. All right. So, what is required? Step 7. What is required and who can help me? So, is it something where, okay, so now there's a new baby. So, we need to find somebody who's going to help us make the transitions that are needed. Maybe you've had a surgery and you need someone to help you with meal prep, or like it could be any number of things. Maybe you're starting a new job and you need to have a mentor that can help you learn the things about that new job that you don't currently know. All right. So, what is required of me now and who can help me? Step 8, manage your stress and emotions. Okay. Very important for us to get to a place where we can understand, okay, I'm acting out of emotion. I am reacting right now to the circumstances, and that is not helpful. So, managing that so that you can act rather than react. Step 9 is take action. So, if I know that I need this mentor person, then now it's time for me to start looking around and saying, okay, who could fill that spot for me? Who do I feel comfortable? Who do I know? Who knows somebody that I need, whatever the case may be. So, taking action is step 9. Stage 4, we're almost there. Stage 4 is it is time. It's time. So step 10 becomes you've got this. We've talked about this again and again. You've already got within you everything that you need in order to become whomever you need to be in this new role. It's hard to see it at first, but that is our step 10. You've got this. So developing that inner inner dialogue, that subliminal soundtrack message that says, okay, I know I've got this. I know I've got this. I'm going to figure it out because I always have. I always have. So that was step 10. You've got this. Step 11 is fun. Step 11 is get your sass on, my friend. So particularly if you find yourself, single again at midlife, it's really fun to play with this. Who is that sassy, sexy, sensual woman? And again, I'm speaking from a woman's perspective because that's what I know. So I'm not trying to be gender specific, but in my experience, who was that sassy, sexy, sensual woman that I used to be? And tapping back into that and playing with this, oh my God, was that fun? All right. So, who is that sassy person that I remember? And how does she fit into my world now? Get your sass on. That is our step 11. And our last stage only has one step. So our last stage 5 is moving forward. And the only step is number 12, jump. That's it. At a certain point, you must take the leap. You must move forward, jump. All right. So you know that you've got it all within you. You know you're now reacquainted with that person that's in there, or maybe you're becoming acquainted with a new person, a new quality that you didn't know that you didn't know. Oh, I'm sorry. Jen says I missed step 4. Step 4 it's called It's Time. There we go. Step 5 is yeah. Okay. I'm going to put this all on the Facebook page. So you can find me on Facebook at Subliminal Mindset Mastery. I will create a post and I'll put all this in there. So this is the context that we are creating our new program, the 6-month program for one-on-one clients. If you know anybody who is in that position, or you find yourself in that position yourself where you are going through a major transition, it is time for you to start over and you don't know what to do, then go to www.bookacallwithjackie.com and book a call with me. We'll talk for a few minutes and we'll see what we can do to help you work through that transition. All right. So you are with me on Time to Rise and Thrive on Inspired Choices Network. Today we are talking about embracing the pain and struggle of starting over, because that's the key. That's the key that will unlock that golden cage that has kept you locked up and stuck. So we're going to head to our last break right now. And when we come back, we'll wrap up this conversation. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
What do you tell yourself when you're not listening? This question came to Jackie Mott when she was trying to find peace and purpose in the wake of tragedy. She began to understand that a lot of her pain and choices had been the result of how she perceived herself and her place in the world. And she set about creating a new subliminal soundtrack that would support her in creating a life of abundance, joy, and fulfillment. To learn more about how she did that and how you can do the same, join Jackie on her radio show, Time to Rise and Thrive, every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central, 11 a.m. Mountain, and 10 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
What do you tell yourself when you're not listening? Our subliminal soundtrack plays in the back of our minds 24/7. It's filled with everything we've ever learned about money, relationships, body, and sexuality, about every single aspect of our lives. If you don't have what you desire, the Subliminal Soundtrack Reset program may be the very key to changing it all. In this 8-week program, designed by Jackie Mott, you'll learn to replace messages that stop your desires with new ones that not only support you in creating what you truly desire, but expand your life to higher levels of joy and pleasure. Go to phoenixcoach.ca today to sign up and begin creating your life on purpose.
This is the Time to Rise and Thrive show with mindset coach and facilitator of change, Jackie Mott. To participate in the program, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. For more information, visit phoenixcoach.ca, where you can follow Phoenix Coaching online. Now, back to the program.
Hello and welcome back to Time to Rise and Thrive on Inspired Choices Network. I am your host, Jackie Mott, and today we are talking about embracing the pain and struggle of change. It has been such a great show, and we are right down to the wire because I went way too long on our last segment. So I'm going to really wrap this up quickly. I want to share with you, there is a movie that I absolutely love. I'm not sure if I've talked about it on the show before, but it's called Hope Floats. Sandra Bullock is in it. I don't know who the other characters are. It doesn't matter. She's our main character. And I love this movie because it shows how she begins, how she goes through this transition time. So she finds her marriage suddenly ends, and she finds herself living with her mother again, with her daughter, and so on and so forth. And it walks us through what she goes through to start living again, to create a new life for herself. There is a quote from this show that I absolutely love, and I'm gonna share it with you right now. Her character is called Bertie Calvert, and it says, "Beginnings are scary, endings are usually sad, but it's the middle that counts the most. Try to remember that when you find yourself at a new beginning, try to remember that when you find yourself at a new beginning, sorry, just give hope a chance to float up, and it will." Isn't that beautiful? I love that quote. I love that quote. So that is sort of the thing that we want to try to embrace. Try to embrace that. Now, I've got a really quick quote to leave you with because we are right down to a minute or so left. Um, any major transition, even happy ones, can be very difficult because we're human beings, and change requires us to change our routines, our social circles, our work, our entire way of life, sometimes even who we are and how we show up in this world. It's important to understand that when we're going into a new situation or we find ourselves dealing with an ending, so we can start to work toward dealing with the fallout and moving forward. All right. So, guys, that's our show for today. I'm sorry to be rushing at the end here, but I hope that you got some really good information as we've gone through. Remember, if you find yourself in a position or you know somebody, send them to www.bookacallwithjackie.com for that 15-minute complimentary session where we can go through what's going on. Now, we'll be back next week, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central, 11 Mountain, and 10 Pacific. Next week, we are calling Trust Your Gut, and we'll be talking about learning to listen to that quiet voice inside for guidance and direction. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've had such a great time with this show. I hope that you have learned something that's helped you shift your perspective. I am Jackie Mott. And join us next week on Time to Rise and Thrive on Inspired Choices Network. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Time to Rise and Thrive radio show. Jackie Mott will return next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 noon Central, 11 a.m. Mountain, and 10 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Have a fantastic week, and remember, it's your time to rise and thrive.